Hey there, Star Wars fans. This is Just Me Ted, 1969 here, coming at you. And it's the 5th of January today, and just looking at some Star Wars comics. Back earlier this week, last week I guess now, heard the news that Marvel's going to be taking over Star Wars licensing from Dark Horse in 2015. Kind of mixed feelings about that, since Dark Horse had been doing some really good work with the Star Wars universe. They've been doing it for a lot of years now, and the Star Wars having had a great success. Apparently this is quite a collectible comic, Star Wars #1, which came out somewhere through last year, I think about spring or so. And really interesting story, really great plot, all the original characters, so just a good thing. And of course they've got dozens of other titles that they've been putting out, little mini-series, Dark Times, Lost Command, Cry of Shadows. So just a really, really enjoyable comic book run. I have to say, Dark Horse Comics probably got me back into comics and going to the comic shop regularly in the last couple of years, as I'd been on a hiatus for about probably 15 or 20 years from collecting. So just thinking about Star Wars going back to Marvel, some people are kind of crying foul and end of the world and that sort of thing, but I have to say, Marvel was there to pick up Star Wars when they first pushed the movie out in 1977. They did the comic book adaptation, and for my part, I'll say, being raised in the small town I was, just an average kid, not as privileged as some kids maybe in the big cities or from richer folks who got a bit more culture out of things. The first experience with Star Wars I ever had was this comic right here. Not this particular one, but one like it. This is another one I got since then. I don't know what became of my original giant size, but basically this is the first, I think, 3 issues of the regular comic book put into a giant sized one, and you can see the comparison in size there. It's about twice the size of an average comic, I'd say, in square area per page. And then of course the last part was in the other giant size that they put out the last 3 books, so that was a decent thing that they did. You had beautiful artwork in them, some giant size exposures. I think there was a couple of possible news articles, I think, if memory serves, without opening it up, in there as well. So yeah, and just to comment on this, the Star Wars in 1977, we had no backstory. We didn't know there was going to be a second Star Wars coming out. Generally known, I don't think it was. If you were a 7-year-old kid, you certainly didn't know that when you first watched the first movie. You just started screaming and you knew that that was great. I think you knew ultimately they had to make another one, but realistically, we didn't even know there was more movies coming out. We didn't know there was a backstory or a forestory or sequels or prequels at those times. So I think what Marvel did with what they had and the existing story was really great. So I think they went up to, like I say, the first 6 issues were pretty much right off the script of A New Hope, or Star Wars as we called it back then. And then they got into, I guess this is the issue where they started going on their own here with their own plots. And of course you've got Han and Chewie breaking away from the rebellion, and they're going their own way, getting in with some space pirates. And there seemed to be a lot of rabbits going around in the 70s. I don't know if that was Bugs Bunny's influence or what have you, but yeah, like you got this, and mind you, it didn't take away from it. I mean, the whole idea of Star Wars was to have alien-looking things, so I guess a rabbit that talks and shoots a laser gun could be pretty alien. And yeah, just to take a quick shuffle through some of these comics, I like how they made Chewbacca kind of like a Bigfoot. He was a big rage in the 70s too. And just the way they drew some of the starships, Star Destroyers here, looking so industrial looking. I like the look of those. This guy always kind of reminded me of Nick Fury, the Hunter. There's some T-16 Skyhoppers. And then we get into Empire Strikes Back. The Wheel of Death. Looks like got a couple of those ones. About 10 or so years ago, I did some work on a guy's computer, and when he came to pay me the next day, he had brought these along since he had seen all my Star Wars stuff and asked if I wanted to do a trade. So he actually traded me his whole original Marvel Star Wars run. I had a few of these on my own, but he had a fair lot more. I might have had a dozen or so, and he had quite a lot more, so I just basically blended our collections, and now they're all one. So we still got Obi-Wan in these, Siege at Yavin, R2 getting shot up, Doom Mission. And you can see the price of comics back in those days too, 40 cents. And as a lot of you know, the original was 35 cents. I think Star Wars, I'm sorry, the first one was actually, yeah, 35 cents for the reprint of Star Wars 1, and it was 30 cents for the original Star Wars 1, which is the collectible one, of course. I don't have that one, but you know, the stories are still the same to read, and you can enjoy them just as much. Monetary value, would I ever sell it even if I had the original? No, so I mean, it's not really worth anything unless you've got the cash in your hand, right? Other than that, it's all sentimental. So that's just part of the fun. And here we've got a little breakaway story on Leia. And then we're back to Luke on Tatooine again. Here's a neat cover with a sandcrawler. Some Jawas in on the action. And this is typical 70s kind of kitschy looking cover, but I love it anyway. Just the really colorful bad guys. Kind of reminds me of that Clone Wars movie they did back in 2008 a little bit. But I mean, this is the era that Star Wars was born into. You know, you had disco lights and disco balls and the whole thing of it. So you really have to kind of keep in mind the whole culture that Star Wars was conceived in. Here's some interesting looking droids, almost look like prequel style droids. And then we're getting into the Empire Strikes Back, so we're probably around 1980 here. Here's a neat cover. More Empire Strikes Back, Droid World, Third Law, The Last Jedi. Some really interesting storylines, you know, considering all things here. Resurrection of Evil. Nice AT-AT. There's a nice TIE bomber on the cover, so you don't see those too often. And of course, back in the 70s, you had the introduction of department store 10-speed racers. I remember those being all the rage. I had a 10-speed. It's kind of what I grew up to after I had my old 20-inch kind of cruiser style bike or whatever they used to call them. And this is the last one I've got from this series here, Star Wars. Kind of neat. You've got a big skeleton of a machine here and a little speeder system. So yeah, that was a great run, and I'm probably going to read them all again pretty soon, just because the new series is coming out in 2015, so that'll be my project for 2014, is to go through those and have a look at them. So yeah, there's the giant size, and we'll just take a look at what Dark Horse has been doing. Again, the Star Wars, really great little collection, and just interesting to see the way George Lucas had conceived it before we got to the final screenplays that we know and love. Some really neat ideas in this one. And then of course they've come out with this Zero reference guide to the galaxy here, so kind of neat to look at. And again, I can't say enough good about Star Wars, the run here. I've got everything so far for that as well. Just a really great series. I highly recommend it. If you can get copies of it, go for it. There's reprints of number 1 now, and they're up to number 12 with Leia's decision here. And just a really great story. You've got Luke and Wedge Antilles. Leia goes off to visit the remains of Alderaan, finds a guy there that kind of conceived the Death Star's super laser, and he's feeling guilty over what his weapon was used for. There's just dozens of different storylines that they've done, Dark Horse has done, all with great characters, all with really good plots. I would highly recommend reading any of these if you haven't done so already. And while we're on the subject of space comics, I just had a few others that have been out recently, I guess over the last year or so, or last months or weeks even. And the Battlestar Galactica always have a soft spot in my heart. And especially with the original series characters, there's been some nice stuff done with that. I like the Starbuck series that they're doing right now. Starbuck's always been one of my favorite characters. I like the Katie Sackhoff version of the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, but I always did enjoy the original Starbuck as well. And just the last thing on the list for today here is something that came out just before Christmas, Robotech and Voltron crossover. Looks like it's going to be pretty fun. It's a Dynamite title, and as are the Galacticas. Dynamite's always been a favorite, a comic of mine since they've been out too. They've just really done comics nicely, really made them enjoyable. So we've got Robotech and Voltron crossed over. The first issue, kind of cryptic. I'm not sure what's going on yet, but it looks like it could be pretty sharp the way it's going to all turn out. So I'm interested in following the whole series of this one. I definitely put it in my file at the comic shop, and going to be excited to see how it turns out because it's looking really good so far. So anyway, I'm going to sign off with that and just leave everyone with that. If you have any thoughts, or if you'd like to see any of the comics I've leafed through here really briefly in more detail, let me know. And don't be afraid to give me a shout out in the comments. May the Force be with you.